Imagine this. It's getting towards the end of the math semester and you're scrambling to finish the math curriculum. You find yourself cramming the remaining lessons into a tight schedule just to get through the content. Then reality hits you. You need to assess your students. In a rush, you hand out a worksheet, but the results aren't great. You're staring at scores that don't show real understanding of the maths concepts you've taught. And now you're panicking. You have no solid evidence of what your students know or don't know, and you're not sure where to go from here. Sound familiar? Now picture this. It's the end of the semester, and you're still behind in the curriculum a little because, let's be honest, that's just part of teaching. But this time, you've been collecting small pieces of evidence of your students' learning all along. With just a quick glance, you can see exactly where your students are. You even realize that some of the upcoming concepts were already touched on in previous open-ended tasks. You tweak your lessons to focus on just a few areas your students need to revisit, seamlessly integrating assessment as you go. No panic, no surprises. You're confident, your students are on track, and you feel in control of your planning. That's the power of effective assessment. And effective assessment is what this session is all about. So if this is an area that you'd like support with, you're in the right place. Welcome to today's session, Rethinking Math Assessment, Creative Ways to Review and Assess Math. In this session, I'll share some practical tips and engaging activity ideas to help you make math review and assessment in your learning space more meaningful and effective. Now, if we haven't met yet, hi, my name is Loren Thorpe, and I'm the face behind the business Blue Sky Designs by Mrs. T. I have been sharing content and creating purposeful products for teachers and parents for the last 8 years to support them as they engage their kids in math and ELA. Those are the two areas that I specialize in. I have experience as a tutor, a substitute teacher, a full-time classroom teacher, and I am now a homeschooling mum as well. I really appreciate the opportunity to connect with like-minded educators worldwide from my home here in Australia. I'd like to quickly say a big thank you for tuning in today. The fact that you're here shows me that you are willing to put in the effort to be intentional with math assessment in your learning space. So, thank you. On behalf of me and your students for the amazing work you do. Thank you for being here. This is a really special conference and I trust that you'll find it valuable as you take what you learn and apply it to your students in your learning space. Today, we're going to be talking about why math assessment and review matter and why we should bother being intentional with this in our learning spaces. Then I'll go through some engaging math activities for effective review and assessment in your learning space. After that, I'll go through some tips for making the most of your assessment results. And finally, I'll give you some ideas for where to go from here. Now, before we dive in, there is a handout that goes along with this session. You can either download that at the end, or you may want to go and download that now to follow along as you listen to this session. There's a section for notes, and there's also further information, resources and readings and things that you can use if you want more support with this topic after this session. So make sure you grab that handout. It's free and you can go and get that at the link provided. First, let's have a quick chat about why math assessment and review matter. Firstly, it's important that we track how well our students understand math concepts and how they're traveling with math overall so that we can best support them. But this can be hard to do through just our usual day-to-day lessons. So setting aside the time to do some math assessment and review can really just help us as we do our planning and teaching and cater to our students' needs. Secondly, having math assessment and review incorporated into our lessons gives us feedback on our teaching. So it helps us to know if we need to give something a little bit more attention and how well we are communicating some of those tricky maths concepts to our students. Finally, reviewing and revisiting math concepts helps students have an opportunity to really solidify their understanding of the maths topics they've covered and to apply that learning to new contexts. Now we're going to go through some engaging math activity ideas for effective math review and assessment. Now, it's likely that we all have some sort of experience with a traditional kind of view of math assessment being some sort of end of topic quiz that happens on a worksheet, or maybe just questions are called out and that is how the math is assessed. That might be something that we've done in our teaching. It might be something that we had growing up. And I'm sure that there are many of you who have found ways to make this a little bit more interesting and engaging for your students already. But I really want us to try and rethink what math assessment looks like and get that kind of traditional idea of math assessment away from our minds so that we can just start fresh and think about what we're actually trying to do and how best to do that with our students. So we're really trying to get a glimpse of their understanding of concepts, and we want to give them an opportunity, a fair chance to really show us what they know. And so that doesn't need to be done in that traditional standard test form. That is one way to do it in certain contexts, but there are so many other ways that we can give kids a chance to show us what they understand. And so that is what I'm going to be going through in this section. Now, the first idea I have for you is to have your students record their learning and understanding in maths journals. And ideally, this would be done throughout the usual maths lessons. Maybe once a week, you could do it daily. At least once every couple of weeks though, because the idea with maths journals is that they are recording their new learning and the understanding that they're coming to as they go. So all you need to do is have some sort of journal, book, even a digital form for them to record on, and then you give them the guidelines around what that looks like, what you're looking for in their maths journals, what sorts of things they could include, so give them some examples. And then the idea is that throughout your maths lessons, as they're learning new topics, as they're trying new activities, as they're coming to new understanding, you can say to them, okay, let's record that in your maths journal, or great job working out that task. Let's get your maths journal out and make a record of that so that we can refer to it later. So the idea is that this just becomes really familiar to students, that it gives them a chance to just in a casual, low pressure way, record their learning, and then you have plenty of evidence of what they've been doing, and you can really clearly see how they're traveling without having to sit them down for one big final review. You've got these little pieces of evidence that you've been tracking all along, and you can really let your students take ownership of this and take on that responsibility of making sure they're recording in their maths journals regularly. What makes this such a great activity to use for assessment is that it only takes 5 to 10 minutes to complete in each sitting. It can be at the end of a lesson, the middle of a lesson, the start of a lesson. It's really flexible, and it can definitely help to take away some overwhelm for students. So especially if you're finding a lot of your students are just not doing well in more high pressure kind of test or assessment conditions, this is a nice low pressure, low overwhelm way to get them to just be recording some of their maths knowledge. The next idea I have for you is to use some maths puzzles in your learning space. I think puzzles are quite an underrated activity in the classroom in general and in math classrooms, but they are super engaging, and from my experience, kids really do get really motivated to complete the puzzles. So it just gives them something that's a little bit new, a bit novel, and presents some of those maths questions that you may put on a worksheet or on task cards in a new way. So there are lots of different kinds of maths puzzles, and I'm sure if you do a quick search, you'll be able to find some examples. I have a picture here of what addition maths puzzles might look like. So you basically have different numbers on each section of the puzzle, and the kids need to work out which numbers go together to find the answer. Now, if your kids are a little bit more advanced, you can also use triangle puzzles where each side of the 3 triangles has an equation on it, and then they need to match that side of the triangle with another triangle where the side has the answer for that equation. So they basically end up creating this big map of triangle shapes that all fit together. So it sounds a little complex, but there is plenty out there that you can use. You don't need to make this yourself, and it can just be something to consider if you're looking for a more hands-on way to get kids reviewing their understanding. This works especially well if you are doing things like basic operations or things that do require like more equation-based review. This is a great activity for that. And something that I also recommend, so another kind of tip for this, is get your students to talk through the process as they complete the puzzle. So ask them to explain to you, like, why do you think this side matches with this side, or why have you put these 2 numbers together to equal 100? What's your thinking here? And then whether they've gotten the puzzle correct or incorrect, you can clearly see what their thinking was to get to that point and how they are thinking about it, and if there's anything you can kind of help them review or rethink as they're going along with the puzzle. Another great way to shake up maths assessment is to give your students the answer and then ask them to come up with the equation or problem. So you can apply this idea to just about any maths topic, and it gives them a great opportunity to practice problem solving. So this can look different depending on the age level you're working with, but for example, you might give them an answer and then say, how many ways can you get to the number 2,179? And then they need to give you some different equations that get to that answer. So that would be an excellent idea if you're working on something like basic operations. You could also do it with like fractions and say the answer is 3 2/3. What is the question? And you could ask them to come up with a word problem or just an equation that would equal that, or you can leave it up to them and let them get creative with it. And this is a great way to see how well they understand some of those basic operations and some of those core math topics. The other thing that is great about this sort of activity is that it allows those students who perhaps need some more support to just approach it from a place that feels comfortable. So if you did have, what's an equation that equals 100, for example, you might have some students who just say 99 plus 1, but that gives you a good idea of how willing they are to stretch themselves and how confident they're feeling with addition or whatever it is that you're going over. It also gives those students who need a bit more extension a chance to really bring in some of those big numbers and those tricky operations. You can also do a how many ways kind of idea with this, so where you encourage them to come up with as many examples as they can in the given time, rather than just one equation to equal the answer or one problem to equal the solution you've given them. So that way, they might start with a few that are kind of easier and more approachable for them, and then they might start to stretch themselves a bit more and think a little bit more about how they can get some more equations or problems to match the given solution. Something else I recommend trying with math assessment is maths challenges. And this is a topic that I really love talking about. If you were at last year's Build Math Minds Virtual Summit, you would have seen my session on that as well. So maths challenges are a great tool. I really, really recommend using them in your classroom. There are just so many different kinds to choose from. So there's lots of options, there's lots of ways to incorporate this in your classroom, but basically you are setting an open-ended challenge and then allowing your students to respond to that challenge in the way that best suits their learning style and the way that they feel makes most sense. So they are bringing their own perspective and they're able to work at their own pace. And again, they can really challenge themselves if they are wanting to stretch themselves further, or they can kind of start at something a little bit easier for them if they are finding maths overwhelming. And so it's great to have open-ended maths challenges as a tool to use in your maths lessons. So this, I find, really helps to engage those students who just don't enjoy the standard maths lessons, and it just kind of twists things and gives them something that they don't already have a negative association with. So they may have like a negative association with walking into a math class and then sitting down at a desk and then I don't know, listening to the teacher talk or doing some sort of activity that's part of their usual routine. So when you give them a maths challenge instead, it just kind of shakes things up a bit, and it means that they're often more willing to give it a try because it's something new and they don't close off before they've even started. Now, there are a lot of different examples of maths challenges, but two really quick ones, just to kind of get you thinking, are to set a number pattern. So you can challenge your students to complete the number pattern that you give them. So you might have something like 3, 6, 9, 12 on the board. If you've been looking at 3 times tables or skip counting by 3, and your students have to firstly work out what makes those numbers similar and how they're related to each other and what the pattern is, and then complete the next few numbers in the sequence. Now, of course, this can get much more complex. You don't need to have something as like straightforward as 3, 6, 9, 12, but that's just an example of what it might look like. Another example, and this works particularly well if you're working on the basic operations, is to have all of the numbers that would be in an equation, but don't give students the symbols in that equation except for the equals sign. And then they need to work out which symbols go amongst the numbers to get to the given answer. So, for example, you could have the numbers 5, 9, 5, 11 equals 71. And then students will need to work out that the symbols that go in to make that equation work are bracket 5 squared, subtract 9, bracket, plus 5 multiplied by 11, bracket, equals 71. So you can see how this really gets them thinking and applying some of their knowledge to this problem solving task. And finally, if you're not sure which kind of maths assessment will work best with your students, you could try letting them choose. So giving students some choice over the tasks they complete helps them to really take ownership over their learning and is great for engagement. A simple way to do this is by setting up maths choice boards for your students to work through. So here I have an example of what this could look like, and this choice board lists options of activities for students to work through based on the topic of mixed operations, and then students can choose which one they complete to show you that they understand this maths topic. Now, there are plenty of pre-made ones you can get. You can also make these yourself. You don't need to have anything fancy. You can just put some options up on your whiteboard if you want, but you are giving students a chance to choose how they display their learning to you, and that really gets them motivated and really gets them engaged. So some examples of things you might put on a choice board if you are using the topic of mixed operations is you could have something like create a poster about yourself that uses mathematical equations to show information like your age, grade, and birthday. Include as many details about yourself as you can. Or make a video explaining how to use the order of operations. Or they could create a board game for other students to play that will help them review the order of operations. Or design a quiz that tests students' skills in using the order of operations. Include deeper level thinking questions. Or you can get them to do things like develop their own number pattern, and you could even include some of the other examples like how many ways can you come up with the result 2,462. So using some of the other examples I've already gone through within your choice board. I hope that those ideas have given you a little bit of inspiration of some new things you can try when it comes to assessment and review in your learning space. I want to quickly touch on some ways to make the most of the results you get through these assessments, and to just give you some tips on how you can use the feedback you're getting from your students through these activities. So one thing that I really recommend is to use the results you get to help guide your future lesson planning. We mentioned this briefly earlier, but you can have a look at how your students are progressing and see if there's something you need to revisit, or if there's something you might need to extend them further in because they're really getting it really quickly and they're needing more of a challenge. So check in from time to time, especially if you're using something like maths journals that kids are kind of able to do on their own in the background. Make sure you're checking in regularly to see how you can use their results to guide your future lesson planning and how you teach and approach maths topics. These sorts of maths assessment activities are also a really great way to clearly see which students need more support from you and which students need more extension. So it might not be that the whole class needs more help with a topic, or that the whole class is picking up on something quickly. It might be some individual students really standing out as needing some more support or needing some more extension. So checking in this way helps you to see who those students are and highlight that to you. And especially when you're working on open-ended tasks, you can really see which of those students are able to extend themselves and apply the learning easily and which ones find that a little bit trickier. And it might surprise you if you are new to using open-ended tasks with your math students. Sometimes those students who have done really well at the kind of question answer type assessments do struggle to approach the more open-ended ones, and sometimes those students who have struggled in the question and answer ones actually are able to approach problem-solving tasks in a really creative way. So that's just, it gives you a new perspective on how confident they're feeling with each of the maths topics you're covering. Something else I recommend is using the maths assessment and review results to give your students some immediate feedback. So as I was talking about earlier with those puzzles and talking and having the students talk through the puzzles to you as they go, that is an excellent opportunity for you to see right there as they're doing the activity how they're going with it, and to then give them some feedback if they need help, and to offer some further guidance or correct something that is a misunderstanding if that exists, or to challenge them further. And you can just really give them that immediate feedback, even if it's something like having a choice board and having them complete something and then give it back to you. That kind of might not be as immediate in how quickly you can get the feedback back to them, but that's still going to be pretty fresh in their minds compared to kind of doing a big end of term or end of semester review and having them not even really remember which activities they did during the term. I really just recommend you give your kids feedback, and you can go through some of these tasks with them and show them new ways to think about things and approach the tasks. And yeah, just let them know ways that they can continue learning and developing their understanding. Finally, you can use math assessment and review results to really celebrate student growth and success, especially when you use activities like the ones we've gone over in this session regularly. You can help your students to see the growth that they've had. So if you're using maths journals, you can help them to see the sorts of things they were recording in their maths journal at the beginning of the year versus towards the end of the year. Or if you are doing a open-ended challenge, like setting a challenge where they need to figure out the number pattern, for example, you can look at how they thought about it or worked it out earlier on, and then they might get to the point where they're creating all sorts of complex number patterns after you've done it a few times, and you can really celebrate that growth with them and have something for them to refer to. So that's another great way to use assessment. I think sometimes we forget about that piece of assessment, but yeah, assessing our students is as much about celebrating their growth and understanding as it is looking for where they need further support. So I hope that helps you rethink math assessment in your learning space. I'd love to hear some of the things that are working for you, or maybe some of the things that haven't been working so well. So feel free to leave them in the chat here. I am in a different time zone, but I would come back and read it if I'm not here live. And I can't wait to see what you have to share. And thank you again for being here. I just want to really let you know I really value your time, appreciate you being here. I know that you are all busy teachers, and so thank you for being here. I'd love to connect with you further, and I do have some further resources and information for you if you would like to find out more. So remember to download that free handout that has the points from today's session highlighted to help you remember them, as well as some further reading links and resources that you can look at. I do have a blog where I share plenty of maths teaching ideas, so you might like to check that out if you're looking for more support. I have a Facebook page too, if you'd like to follow along on social media. I also have a TPT store under the name Blue Sky Designs by Mrs. T. That includes some of the resources mentioned today, things like maths challenges and things that are pre-made, ready to go. If you prefer not to put them together yourself, I have some ready for you. I also have a set of choice boards available for 4th grade maths, and I've looked at what is covered in the curriculum and made a maths choice board that goes along with each of the main topics in the curriculum. So pretty much whatever area you're working on with your 4th graders, if you work with 4th graders, should be covered in this choice board set. So I'll leave some links if you'd like to look there and find some further support. You can also email me if you'd like to reach out that way, and I'll leave my email on the screen so that you can find me that way. So thank you again for tuning in. I hope you enjoy the rest of this fantastic conference, and all the best as you apply some of these activities in your maths learning space and think about new ways to do assessment and review with your students.